Working the night shift at St. Mary's Hospital was supposed to be an easy way to make extra money while I was in school. The hospital was old, with a history dating back to the early 1900s. It had seen countless patients over the years, and the walls seemed to hold on to their memories, whispering secrets in the dead of night. My job was to man the front desk, assist the occasional late-night visitor, and ensure the hospital remained secure. Most nights were quiet, with only the hum of the fluorescent lights and the distant beeping of medical equipment to keep me company. But one night everything changed, and I came face to face with the supernatural. It was around 2 a.m. when a nurse approached the desk, her face pale and eyes wide with fear. "There's something wrong in room 304, she whispered. "I keep hearing noises, but when I check, there's no one there." Room 304 was in the old wing of the hospital, a section that was rarely used. It was said to be haunted by the spirit of a patient who had died under mysterious circumstances decades ago. Staff members often reported strange occurrences in that room: cold spots, flickering lights, and disembodied voices. But I had always dismissed the stories as mere superstition. Curiosity getting the better of me, I decided to investigate. I grabbed my flashlight and made my way to the old wing. The halls were dimly lit, and the air grew colder as I approached room 304. The door was slightly ajar, and I could hear a faint, rhythmic tapping coming from inside. I pushed the door open and stepped into the room. It was empty, save for an old hospital bed and a few pieces of outdated medical equipment. The tapping continued, louder now, coming from the far corner of the room. I shone my flashlight in the direction of the sound and saw a small figure huddled on the floor. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling. The figure didn't respond. I took a few steps closer, and the flashlight revealed the figure to be a young girl, dressed in a tattered hospital gown. Her hair was matted, and her eyes were hollow, dark voids that seemed to absorb all the light. "Are you okay?" I asked, reaching out a hand. The girl looked up at me, and her lips moved, but no sound came out. Suddenly, the room grew icy cold, and I felt a chill run down my spine. The girl's eyes widened in fear, and she pointed to the corner behind me. I turned around slowly, and my flashlight flickered. In the corner stood a tall, shadowy figure, its eyes glowing with a malevolent light. It moved closer, and I could feel an overwhelming sense of dread wash over me. The girl screamed, and the shadowy figure lunged at me. I stumbled back, my heart pounding in my chest. The flashlight slipped from my hand and rolled across the floor, casting eerie shadows on the walls. The figure loomed over me, its presence suffocating. Just as it reached out to touch me, the door to the room slammed shut, and the figure vanished. Breathing heavily, I scrambled to my feet and grabbed the flashlight. The girl was gone, and the room was silent once more. I didn't wait to see if the figure would return. I fled the old wing and returned to the front desk, my mind racing. The nurse who had alerted me to the strange noises was waiting for me, her face pale with fear. "Did you see her?" she asked. "The girl in room 304? I nodded, still trying to catch my breath. She told me that the girl was a patient who had died in that room many years ago. Her spirit was said to be trapped, tormented by the malevolent entity that haunted the old wing. I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that lingered after my encounter. I tried to focus on my work, but the memory of the shadowy figure and the girl's hollow eyes haunted me. The next morning, I told my supervisor what had happened, but he dismissed it as a hallucination brought on by fatigue. I continued to work at the hospital, but I avoided the old wing at all costs. The stories of room 304 and its ghostly inhabitants became all too real for me. I couldn't shake the feeling that the shadowy figure was watching, waiting for another chance to strike. Years later, I still have nightmares about that night. The hospital has since been renovated, and the old wing is no longer in use. But the memory of the haunted room and its tormented spirits remains with me, a chilling reminder of the dark secrets that lurk in the shadows of St. Mary's Hospital. Before we get into the next story, if you come for the first time, please make sure to subscribe to a channel and press the bell icon for upcoming scary stories. We need your support. Please share the stories with your friends and family. Thanks. Taking the graveyard shift at the local cemetery seemed like an easy gig. The job was simple: patrol the grounds, ensure no one disturbed the peace, and report any unusual activity. The cemetery, known as Greenwood Memorial Park, was a sprawling landscape of weathered headstones, ancient trees, and winding paths. It had a reputation for being haunted, but I never believed in such things. That was before I experienced the terror firsthand. The first few nights were uneventful. I would walk the grounds, flashlight in hand, listening to the night sounds and occasionally seeing a stray cat or a raccoon. The cemetery was eerily beautiful at night, the moonlight casting long shadows over the graves and the mist swirling around the statues and mausoleums. It was peaceful in a way, and I began to enjoy the solitude. One particularly foggy night, as I was patrolling the old section of the cemetery, I heard a faint sobbing sound. It was coming from a grave marked with an angel statue, a place where no one had been buried for decades. The sound was so full of sorrow that it sent chills down my spine. I approached the grave, flashlight trembling in my hand. The sobbing grew louder, filled with an overwhelming sadness. I called out, "Hello? Is someone there?" The sobbing stopped abruptly, and the cemetery fell into an eerie silence. Suddenly, I felt a cold hand on my shoulder. I spun around, but there was no one there. The air grew colder, and I could see my breath in the dim light. I heard a voice whisper, "Help me," so close it felt like it was right in my ear. Terrified, I backed away from the grave, only to trip over a root and fall to the ground. When I looked up, the angel statue seemed to be looking down at me, its eyes glowing faintly in the fog. The sobbing resumed, louder and more desperate. I scrambled to my feet and ran back to the caretaker's office. I locked the door and tried to calm my racing heart. The next morning, I told my supervisor what had happened, but he just laughed it off, saying the old section was known for playing tricks on people. He mentioned that many workers had reported strange experiences, but assured me that there was nothing to worry about. Determined to prove myself, I returned to work that night. I couldn't shake the feeling of dread as I walked the grounds, my flashlight casting long, eerie shadows. I avoided the old section, sticking to the newer graves where the atmosphere felt less oppressive. Around midnight, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around, but no one was there. I continued walking, but the footsteps persisted, always just behind me. My heart pounded in my chest, and I quickened my pace. The footsteps grew louder, echoing in the night. I stopped and turned around, determined to confront whatever was following me. To my horror, I saw a figure emerging from the fog. It was a woman, dressed in a long, flowing gown, her face pale and expressionless. Her eyes were dark voids, and her hair floated around her like a dark halo. She moved silently, her feet not touching the ground. "Help me," she whispered, her voice echoing with sorrow and despair. I backed away, my mind racing. The woman reached out with a skeletal hand, and I felt an icy chill run through my body. I turned and ran, not stopping until I reached the caretaker's office. I locked the door and huddled in the corner, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. I could hear the woman's voice outside, whispering and sobbing, pleading for help. The next morning, I told my supervisor what had happened. This time, he didn't laugh. He told me that the woman I had seen was known as the Cemetery Bride, a spirit who had been seen by many over the years. According to legend, she had died tragically on her wedding day and was buried in the old section of the cemetery. Her spirit was said to wander the grounds, searching for her lost love and begging for help. I couldn't bring myself to return to the cemetery after that night. The memory of the Cemetery Bride and her haunting whispers was too much to bear. I quit my job and tried to move on with my life, but the experience left a lasting mark on me. Even now, years later, I can still hear her voice in my nightmares, calling out for help. her sorrowful sobs echoing in the darkness. Greenwood Memorial Park may look like a peaceful resting place by day, but I know the truth. When night falls, the spirits of the past awaken, and the cemetery becomes a place of terror and despair.